If one turns to bin Laden, al-Qaeda, just briefly and asks, what does bin Laden want? I think he confuses Americans because on the one hand, there's clearly a political agenda. He wants to get America out of the Middle East, he said so, and he wants to weaken America, perhaps destroy America. But he wants something more that's more amorphous, and it has to do with destroying all that is insufficiently Islamist in his eyes in order to renew and purify the world in that Islamist image. And in this whole process, there is again an attraction to this, for many, Robin Hood figure who's seen to have the strength and courage to stand up to the Americans, even if many of those who feel that way would not condone the kind of violence that bin Laden engages in. One has to, and I'll just put this briefly, look at a kind of terrorist dynamic, and one has to look at their relationship to society. They can be on the fringe as al-Qaeda is, and yet they can have enormous appeal for those at the center in the way that I mentioned, and the same can be true of, for instance, the murder of Rabin, who was at the fringe, certainly, of Israeli society, but had contact with various rabbis who were closer to the mainstream, some of whom gave him the signal to go ahead with this murder. And one has to also look at some of the sources of humiliation on the part of Islamic people. If one condemns, as one should, the violence of al-Qaeda, one can nonetheless recognize that there are genuine grievances held by those who participate in that violence. And those grievances include humiliation over the centuries of Western imperialism, certainly over the course of the 19th and 20th century, and 19th and 20th centuries, and even the carving out of the Middle East into national states, almost at the whim of Great Britain and to some extent France after World War I. But these issues apply not just to them, to Ohm or to the Nazis. Really, they come very much to haunt us here at home and much closer to ourselves in the behavior of the present administration. Putting it very simply, I describe in my most recent book what I call superpower syndrome to mean a sense of entitlement on the part of America as the most powerful military country in the world, a sense of entitlement to rule all the major regions of the world and to really determine the course of history, so that the war on terrorism becomes a kind of survivor mission for 9/11, is mounted right after 9/11. Right at the time of 9/11, Bush and Rumsfeld are calling it a war. We're at war is the way that Cheney put it, as opposed to a counter-terrorist operation which could have been internationalized and could have been much more effective, directed at those really responsible for 9/11. And Woodward's book about those first 100 days is called Bush at War. The war on terrorism is itself apocalyptic, mainly because it's amorphous, without limits in time or space, and has no clear end, and therefore enters into the realm of the infinite. One could say a lot more about that, but certainly the invasion of Iraq becomes an extension of the war on terrorism, even though, as we well know, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. In this way, the war on terrorism becomes a kind of American military apocalyptic that acts in concert or in tandem with the Islamist apocalyptic. There are apocalyptic trends in the United States. One can look at the terminology of the axis of evil, but also the sense of Bush acting on what Woodward has termed God's master plan, as though he sees himself as an agent of the deity and has a purifying mission of his own, which is spreading a version of freedom and democracy became a man on a mission with 9/11 and has used such phrases as, "I'm in the Lord's hands, and there is a reason why I'm here." We know about his famous or infamous suppression of all doubt. He has a psychological style that won't allow doubt, but which also draws upon this fundamentalist and apocalyptic tendency toward a higher purpose and an ultimate mission. It can be called, as it has been by Richard Slotkin, regeneration through violence. And we see it in various aspects of American history, but never to the extent of the present administration. There is the claim of, or impulse toward, a claim of invulnerability. A superpower cannot be vulnerable. And yet, ironically, we, the strongest military power in the world, might be the most fearful of all nations. It was that fear which the present administration manipulated shamelessly, not only in the campaign, but long before that, in conveying the message that only they could protect us. Americans are not good at being vulnerable. You know, we have this history of being protected by the oceans, and we have this sense of ourselves as being an exceptional nation that is free from the travails of European and other powers. And then with the creation of the American superpower and becoming the only superpower after the end of the Cold War, there's this sense and claim of invulnerability in connection with what I'm calling the superpower syndrome. Ironically, nuclear weapons, which are key to superpower status, are also a source of the undermining of that claim of omnipotence because of the inevitability of proliferation, which is occurring in the world, occurring partly in response to our nuclearistic policies. We embrace nuclear weapons. We seek to make more creative nuclear weapons. We create a psychological and political climate in which others are drawn to nuclear weapons. And then we seek to interfere with proliferation, and certainly proliferation is dangerous, but interfere all too often by military means rather than the kinds of careful diplomacy and other approaches that are really required. So more than any other nation, the superpower is bedeviled by its vulnerability. All this then is in the service of what I call fluid world control. It has to do with this effort to be a new kind of empire, not exactly like the British Empire, which put bureaucrats on the ground and created institutions, but rather a kind of hit-and-run policy of controlling events, not staying around long enough, returning when more military forces considered necessary, and a vision or fantasy of fluid world control that also does not and cannot work. And again, if you think I'm making this up, just read the National Security Strategy document of September 2002 and what it advocates in terms of American power in the world. If you look at the invasion of Iraq and look at all the reasons given, disarming Saddam Hussein of weapons of mass destruction, deposing regime change, spreading democracy in the Middle East, or even the issue of oil, which is the most real of those four, they are all subsumed, including the oil, to this American impulse toward fluid world control, toward controlling that region of the world in which Iraq is so important, and doing so through control of the oil. Now, just in my final remarks, I want to talk about what's in my title, Americans as Survivors, and to look at Vietnam again and Iraq and 9/11 as well. And what I want to say very briefly is that we've had two great American traumas since the end of World War II, and those are Vietnam and 9/11. And it looks as though Iraq is a third trauma whose extent we still have yet to learn. It may be that Iraq becomes the trauma and the heart of the Bush administration story.